best way to think about me is as a CTO for the cloud software business unit at Juniper, which, as you might imagine, is a small piece of the Juniper business, but an interesting piece. And as you can tell, I am not the typical Juniper executive. I did not forget my jacket. I did not lose my luggage. I focus more on open source and OpenStack. That's my thing. Less OpenStack these days, more generally open source and open contrail, I should say. And so kind of following on a couple of the presentations you just saw, one of the things I wanted to talk about is how people are sort of missing the boat on DevOps. And I'm not going to talk about the specifics of DevOps, not too much, because I really don't care. I care more about sort of the business value, and that's what this presentation is really about. And we're going to dig into that, so let's go. All right, so I think everybody knows this now, right? Does anybody disagree with the fact that public cloud is winning? Raise your hand. Now is your opportunity. Okay. In the early days of cloud, when I was doing a lot of presenting and when I was sort of promoting the pets versus cattle thing, which is something that I am sort of responsible for making popular, a lot of people disagreed with me. But I think over time what we've seen is that it's very clear that the public cloud is winning. It's doing something fundamentally different, and that's part of what we're going to talk about today. So why? This is the thing, right? We can talk cloud native, we can talk containers, we can talk about all kinds of stuff, and at the root of it all is sort of a sea change. There's sort of a new understanding that if you don't move faster, your lunch will be eaten. And that is driving all of this change across the entire industry, right? That's what is causing all of the chaos. That's what is causing all of us to be here and to try to figure out how to change the way that we're doing things in our business. And the thing is that a lot of the time, people lose sight of the fact that speed is life. I'm going to tell you a story. I got lots of stories, and I was told I have a few extra minutes, so I'm going to tell one story. Very early on in the cloud days, almost pre-cloud, 2005, Credit Suisse, the financial services company, built one of the first internal private clouds. Amazon was not even launched yet. They put it up. There was a self-service portal. Developers could go. They could order a VM on demand that they could then use to create their development environment. As soon as that happened, the people at the help desk for Credit Suisse freaked out, because now they were disintermediated, so they insisted and went through the whole political war inside the business to throw up a ticket wall. So now, instead of turning on a VM yourself by logging into the portal or going through the APIs, instead what you did is you went to the help desk system, you filled out a ticket, you put in your username and your password, thank you, financial services company, and then the help desk people logged into that system for you to spin up a VM on your behalf, right? That is where things break down. The aha moment, the reason that things are changing is because of this recognition that speed is what matters. Agility and the ability to pivot and zig and zag is what matters. The reason that so many of these large businesses like Amazon Web Services and Google and Facebook and Apple are now being so effective and are delivering so many new services and products on such a rapid basis is because they act like a big distributed set of startups. And so now everybody needs to do that. And they all kind of get that. You may not think about it in those exact words, but you understand, and you're trying to get there. So I like to simplify it down. I say, and I apologize for the eye chart, and I like to say this is really about time to value for the business. Whatever the new initiative is that you're trying to accomplish, can you go and can you get it done as quickly as possible and measure for success, right? In startup parlance, that means the minimum viable product a lot of the time, right? And then wrapped around that are a whole bunch of things, right? Just the one layer after that is all these on-demand services, whether it's private cloud or public cloud or hybrid or whatever it is, right? And then along with that, people have recognized that they want platform independence, right? That's what's driven all these interests in OpenStack and in Kubernetes and containers more generally, is that people don't want to be locked into any of these ecosystems. And then you've got attached to this all the things that we sort of, associate with DevOps, like continuous deployment, continuous testing, and what I call continuous response. And then the intersection of those things is how do I make sure that it's all automated, right? Because DevOps without automation, without APIs is nothing, right? You can't really succeed. So if we look at what's happened in the enterprise for the last 30, 40 years, we have this really interesting culture problem, which is that we have the line of business, which largely has the application developers incentivized to try to deliver new value to the business as quickly as possible. A new service, new application, whatever it is. And they're doing everything they can to move fast. And then we've got the centralized IT teams who are managing all the infrastructure, and they're incentivized to manage down risk. And so what happens is we have the app developers or line of business come to the centralized IT teams and they say, hey, you know, we've got a new service or application we want to put in production. And here's our list of requirements. And the infrastructure team looks at that and they say, okay, we'll get back to you. They come back a little bit later and they say, that'll be 18 months and $10 million. And so the application teams, line of business, just sit there and wait, and wait, and wait. What's changed now is that they no longer have to wait. They go to Amazon and they get this much of their requirements. They don't get their F5 load balancers or their vMax storage with synchronous replication between sites or whatever the crazy things were in their, 200 item list long requirement set, because they didn't care about any of those things. What they actually cared about was getting their application up and running yesterday, not in 18 months. And that's the loggerheads that we've been at until sort of the public cloud came along and sort of blew that all up. Right? And so that's what we're in the midst of now, is understanding that culture change and understanding that there has to be a way to renegotiate the interaction between the line of business and the centralized IT teams so that we can deliver fast while managing down risk. And that is largely why DevOps is being looked at by the enterprise. So here's a definition from Wikipedia, but the important thing here is to understand that DevOps is not only a set of practices and culture, but also tooling, which we're going to talk about today, for building, testing, and releasing software, that can happen rapidly, frequently, and more reliably. That's the nut of it. And some people, the DevOps practitioners, the ones who, like to sort of pontificate, they'll tell you, oh, well, you can't just leave off reliably. It's all about, it's not just about speed. And I would say if you can't do it reliably, then you can't have speed, right? So pretty much everything, in my opinion, falls out of speed. Can you get the software out there and it's running and you measure the value to your customers as quickly as possible? Can you tighten that iteration loop? That is the only thing that matters in the future. So what do I mean by, sort of architecture and tool changes? Well, people are moving towards these models of sort of more fully distributed composable services, right? They talk about microservices. They talk about something I'm going to talk about today called services as a platform. But the nut of it is that there has to be a different way of thinking about your application architecture and tooling around how it's developed, how it's deployed, and how it's managed in order to adopt a DevOps culture. So when I look at what has happened historically, people had a very simple view of cloud. It was infrastructure as a service, then platform as a service, and software as a service. But if we look at sort of the canonical cloud, which is Amazon Web Services, actually the vast majority of what they're doing is in what I call services as a platform, a layer in between infrastructure as a services and platform as a services that we're going to talk about in a lot of detail in a moment. And for me, one thing that we're not going to have a lot of time to spend on today is that I see that Kubernetes is becoming a key enabling piece to allow people to build their own services as a platform systems. So just to revisit some definitions. Software as a service, I think everybody knows what that is. Platform as a service for me, this is the definition I've been operating with for 10 plus years now. I think of it as a load your code and go system. So developers say, look, there's my source code repo. I want that commit, stick that in, turn it on, run it, right? So think of it as WebLogic 2.0, WebSphere 2.0 in the new modern age. Examples are Cloud Foundry, OpenShift, Apprenda, and so on. And then infrastructure as a service, typically the agreed upon definition is it's the core foundational compute, storage, and networking that's available via APIs that, is sort of common across all infrastructures. Services as a platform, though, is something far more important, right? It's this notion that you want to go to your cloud provider, be they internal or external, and you want them to do as much of the undifferentiated heavy lifting as possible. You want them to provide a database service. You want them to provide a DNS service. Like you would like to build 70 or 80% of what your app needs without building it. You'd like to focus only on the key parts of your code that are critical to your code being successful. Why should your developers become experts at running Cassandra or Hadoop? They should be experts at using Cassandra or Hadoop, right? And why should every deployment have its own Cassandra and its own Hadoop, right? You'd like to have common shared assets that can be used across all the different platforms. And that's really what services as a platform is. And we're going to double click again. So a lot of times when I sort of bring this up, people say, oh, well, that just sounds like PaaS. No. Right? Platform as a service is more like a straitjacket, right? It says you use this kind of code, you have this kind of architecture, you use 12-factor, whatever it is. It's got a whole process by which, if you follow these steps, your code can run in production. And it is focused almost exclusively on developers. Platform as a service has little or nothing to do with operators, right? There's no spot for DevOps because it's a constrained, prescriptive system. Services as a platform is designed for developers and operators. It is meant to be a microservices-friendly environment, right? In one, you sort of get everything that's there in the platform as a system, right? You have a PaaS, and they decided to hook it up to Hadoop. That's great. Now you can use Hadoop. But if they haven't hooked up that PaaS to Cassandra, you're out of luck, no Cassandra, right? You don't get choice. In the SaaP model and the SaaP model, you get as much choice as you want because it's a la carte. So Amazon Web Services really is services as a platform. I know this is hard for people to grok. They're like, oh, they provide VMs on demand and EBS and VPC. Yes, that's all there. It's in the bottom row. You can see it there in that sort of, I'm going to say teal. My wife's going to give me a hard time because I'm colorblind, so help me out there. Is that teal? Close enough? So that's all there, but then we've got the platform as a service layer, some constrained systems like Lambda functions and Beanstalk that, are what I would expect platform as a service to be. And then the vast majority of Amazon Web Services investments have nothing to do with either infrastructure as a service or platform as a service. They're these point solutions. Relational database as a service, load balancing as a service, batch processing, Hadoop, DNS. I mean, you can just go on and on and on and on. And the reason is, and you might not have caught it in this previous definition here, but this very last part of the first bullet point, services that are part of a services as a platform system are meant to be assembled into a customized platform as a service that is application specific by DevOps teams. And so I'll give you an example. There's this company that you probably heard of, I think everybody has at this point, called Netflix, right? We all love Netflix. No, I'm not caught up on Game of Thrones. Netflix is a prime example. When they moved from their legacy infrastructure and they moved everything up onto Amazon Web Services, they went through a process of refactoring and re-architecting their entire system, and they essentially built a customized platform as a service for the Netflix platform. They couldn't go shove that in Cloud Foundry. They couldn't go shove it in some other platform as a service system. They had to build their own custom system. And there are good reasons for that, right? Netflix is not some utility application that does billing, right? It's a core piece of intellectual property. And what you're going to find is that for all the highly competitive, for all the things that you're working on that are highly competitive, differentiating, those items are going to almost certainly need sort of their own custom PaaS, right? And that PaaS is going to need to evolve over time, right? And so what you see today is not only is Amazon structured like this for their customers, but if we look at companies like Google, they're a big layer cake of these kinds of services as well. Google internally has, Google File System, which is distributed storage, and then it's got MapReduce, which runs on top of that, and Bigtable, which runs on top of that, and so on. And these are sort of common services that are then used by, Google Mail, Google Search, Google Apps, and so on, right? So you have a layer cake of sort of common services, which includes many infrastructure services, but also this services as a platform layer. And then you've got the specific services that you deliver to your customers. And each one of those services that delivers uses some subset of the functionality, maybe not all of it. Maybe they don't all need Bigtable. Maybe they don't all need MapReduce, and so on. So DevOps, without thinking about services as a platform, without having that enablement within your business, whether you're consuming it from a public cloud or building it as part of a private cloud, It just makes no sense, right? You have to have the services as a platform, concept, right? Because otherwise you've got sort of the one-offs thing happening again. You've got the DevOps guys going, okay, we need to deploy this new app, and it requires Cassandra, and it requires, Hadoop, and it requires MongoDB. I don't know why you put all three of those together, but let's say you did. Now they're going to roll up, each one of those other services in addition to your application to be deployed and managed. Right? And rather than having a common MongoDB, a common Cassandra, a common Hadoop that can be used across all the different applications that need it. So back to this eye chart. When you take those pieces that I sort of, I kind of created this kind of, architecture where you could say that the business time value is the most important thing, and what that means is it needs these external services, it needs them to be automated, it needs platform independence, it needs continuous testing, all those pieces. And then as you go ring out, what does continuous deployment mean? What does, having, these external service, on-demand services mean, and so on. What you see is they very clearly break down into the stuff that's about culture, process, people, which is, the sort of nut of what DevOps is, right? And then the sort of enablement pieces, the tools, the architecture, the thinking, the sort of like ways that the applications are being rewritten and deployed and managed, and those things come together. And you can't, they're really inseparable. So when I see people trying to adopt DevOps as a culture, that's great, and then when they're not thinking about what they need inside the business as an enablement piece for that, it turns out that they don't get to where they want to be. And vice versa. When people are busy building all the tooling and then not thinking about the culture change, they don't get there either. So this a lot of times begs sort of a question at the very end of this, which is, okay, Randy, I bought into everything you said, and I'm going to move forward with this. I'm going to start thinking about services as a platform. This matters to me. But how would I do it internally? Right? Our business has decided we can't go to public cloud, or this specific application can't go to public cloud for whatever reason. And I say, well, actually, it turns out that almost everything that Amazon's done, and this is probably out of date at this point, but almost everything that Amazon's done is reproducible and open source software. When you go out there and you look at the different services that are available, there's an analog for it. Now, can your business go and build sort of a healthy internal private cloud with services as a platform on top of it that has like an ecosystem of services that all your internal developers can use or not? I don't know. But I do know that unless they do, they will not win against public cloud, period, end of discussion. And I do know that all the tools are there for them to do that. And then the piece that I can't spend a lot of time on today, but it's at the end of my summary, is that Kubernetes, and in particular Helm charts, are a good way for people to start thinking about building a services as a platform system. So again, just to recap, speed is life, right? This, anytime anybody's telling you anything else about cloud, cost reduction, all that other nonsense, just it really does not matter. This is about moving fast, and this is about creating a new culture in your business that moves fast, because the rest of the world is moving fast, and if your business doesn't move fast, then you're going to get run over, period. I mean, it's just like, I don't even think that this is disputable anymore these days. And the second is that most enterprises see that one of the ways that they're going to get to that is to change the culture and the tooling by adopting DevOps. And then hopefully you'll see from today's presentation that that means pairing DevOps with that sort of a mindset around services as a platform that's more mindful, where you're going in and you're actually thinking about what does services as a platform mean for us, what kind of services do we need that are common across all the different applications that are being built, how do we manage and deploy those in a DevOps model, like we're going to do the applications themselves, how do we get operational leverage and economies of scale and so on, right? Because the bulk of the work is in that area, it's not in the infrastructure or PaaS areas. And going and taking a PaaS and retrofitting it, that's not going to work, but that's a different presentation. And then again, if you haven't, and it's out of scope for today, but if you haven't looked at Kubernetes or Helm yet, I encourage you to do so. And the big difference there, the reason I bring it up, is that Kubernetes is a deployment model for applications and services that includes the full software development lifecycle. It tells you how you deploy the apps, tells you how you upgrade them, tells you how you do a rolling upgrade that's that doesn't have an impact on production services and so on. And so I see a lot of people gravitating towards Kubernetes as the underlying substrate that they're using to build services as a platform in their businesses. And if you look around, you'll see that everybody's sticking everything on top of Kubernetes these days, whether it's OpenStack or OpenContrail or something else. And really, that's it. Thank you.